The sacredness of gift giving does not come naturally to me. When I was a child, I went with my mother to the house of one of her friends for a holiday gathering, and I was entrusted by Mom to bring in the present that she was bringing for our hostess and to be the one to physically bring it over and give it to her. So we got inside, got in the door, and I immediately marched over to our hostess and I said, "Here are your earrings, Pam." As I grew older, it doesn't get much better. As I grew older, I managed to elevate my awkwardness around practices and rituals of gift giving onto an international scale. When my American colleagues and I first arrived in Ankara, Turkey, for being English as a second language teachers, we were taught the custom in that country to refuse any gift 3 times before accepting it. The point being that one must not seem too greedy to receive the generous offering. And this led to a curious moment just before the winter holidays when there were office parties and a mixing of American and Turkish traditions. Has everyone agreed to accept gifts by default, we wondered? Or is it still necessary to somehow turn down a present 3 times if it comes from your secret Santa? The Turkish teachers assured us that there was no need to turn down the gift 3 times in that scenario, and they graciously insisted that the custom was rarely followed nowadays anyway. So when I was little, I accidentally took a very literal view of gift giving. As a young adult, I inadvertently delved into the awkwardness that can arise from different cultural expectations around gift giving. But as a Unitarian Universalist and a minister, I have grown to appreciate the meaning-making that accompanies gift giving, to honor it as a symbol of the most important aspects of who we are in religious community. Honoring gift giving as a meaningful thing in and of itself is not a trivial viewpoint in our modern American economy. Much has been written in recent years about the economics of gift giving and how giving people presents is worse than giving cash or gift cards or charitable donations in a person's name. Joel Waldfogel wrote a paper in 1993 in the American Economic Review entitled "The Deadweight Loss of Christmas." In this paper, he argued that over 10% of the spending on holiday gifts resulted in deadweight loss because of the difference in how much one person spent on a gift versus how much another person values it. He writes, the best a gift giver can do with, say, a $10 gift is to duplicate the purchase that the recipient would have made. However, he continues, it is more likely the gift will leave the recipient worse off than if she had made her own consumption choice with an equal amount of cash. In short, gift giving is a source of deadweight economic loss. Now, I think it is worth noting that the study that led to these conclusions was done based on surveys given to Yale undergraduates. And while there are many fine traits that overprivileged 19-year-olds possess, one does not necessarily assume that a deep sense of gratitude is among them. My apologies to any Yaleys here this morning. No need to identify yourselves now. I will see you at the regatta. I sense that Waldvogel has gotten a lot of pushback in the last 20-something years, though, because he gave an interview in 2016 where he said, gift giving can make both givers and recipients happy in ways that buying for oneself might not. So jumping to the conclusion that people should stop giving gifts is by itself not necessarily warranted. I take both his original and his more recent points. There's a lot to be said for a practice of gift giving that empowers the choice of the receivers, like giving money does. I do that often, and I am always excited and grateful when I get money as a present. It is no doubt a rational way to show our love and appreciation for each other, but I hope that we will not throw the baby out with the bathwater by denying the value of what it feels like to give and receive items that are thoughtfully chosen. Indeed, there is a deep sacredness to gift giving throughout human history. In a 1954 essay entitled "The Gift," Marcel Mauss outlines what gift giving says about the relationship between humans and the divine. He connects gift-giving rituals in many cultures with religious rituals, positing that gift-giving practices are a reflection of the relationship between humans and the divine, that they are, in fact, a central element of religious life. He illustrates how that happens in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Native American religion, and I will add how I have seen it show up in UU faith communities. The Encyclopedia of Religion draws on Mauss's work to describe that in Hinduism, quote, in the period following 600 BCE, in the aftermath of the growing anthropomorphization of the deity, the characteristic offerings in worship were likened to the food and gifts given to exalted human beings. Thus, it has often been mentioned that the style of Hindu temple worship is patterned after the court life of ancient India. The deity is considered to be the most respectable and powerful associate of humanity, a visitor from another realm who condescends to dwell for a time within images in temples, and who can be approached with gifts, services, art, music, and literature. In fact, gifts from the whole realm of human creativity can be offered to him. Here we can see that the gift-giving rituals of humans were literally being enacted as religious rites. We can start to see the sacred importance of gift-giving for human cultures. And we see it also in Buddhism, where again the Encyclopedia of Religion notes, there is a type of gift-giving that is explicitly meant to relieve the needs of the poor and the destitute, called almsgiving. Almsgiving likewise has a role to play in the economy of the ascetic life, wherein monks and nuns live under some kind of vow of poverty and must therefore be supported by the actively working laity. Since Buddhism is a religion in which the monastic community is the main focus, it follows that almsgiving will be a general practice among Buddhists. So, it even seems to work both ways. The gift-giving practices of culture can shape what its worship of the divine looks like in Hinduism, while in Buddhism, the religious ascendance of monasticism shapes the gift-giving practices of a culture to revolve around the practice of almsgiving. A clearer sense is emerging that gift-giving is no trivial aspect of who we are and how we are together, but rather a definitional one, whether we are aware of it or not. Mauss describes the tradition of the potlatch that emerged among Native American tribes of the Northwest region of North America as the most meaningful illustration of gift-giving's power. They were an instance in which the practices around gift-giving shaped both the economy and the meaning-making structures of the tribes they originated in. Potlatches are described as an elaborate celebration entailing the lavish display and distribution of the host possessions. One example was the Kwakiutl Indians, for whom the distribution of gifts was not about the accumulation of possessions, but rather the gaining of status that came along with demonstrating one's munificence. Maus describes the multifaceted role of the potlatch, writing, "It is religious, mythological, and shamanistic because the chiefs taking part in incarnations are incarnations of gods and ancestors whose names they bear, whose dances they dance, and whose spirits possess them." It is also economic, and one has to assess the value, importance, causes, and effects of transactions which are enormous, even by European standards. So here again, gift giving is a foundation, a foundational importance to the meaning structure of a culture. All of these examples, from Hinduism, Buddhism, and Native American culture and religion, point to a level of sacred importance for how humans make their own cultures of giving one another gifts. As I was reflecting on gift giving in UU congregations and the ways we build sacred meaning through this practice, I kept coming back to an image from my home congregation in Central Maine. There we would have a religious education volunteer recognition service at the end of each program year. We call our program Religious Exploration at UUCA, but when I was growing up, it was Religious Education. At the recognition service, each of the volunteers were given a perennial pot in a 4-inch pot filled with soil with a flower. The flowers were donated by Bill and Rachel Marsh Sachs, who own and operate a perennial farm. The farm is their business, and it is also how they donate to the congregation. The proceeds from their plants at the annual church yard sale mean they are some of the highest givers to the church in financial terms. I also admire the spiritual generosity embodied in the process of growing something on your land, putting it on a truck, bringing it directly to your spiritual community, and nurturing that community through your gift. When I arrived at UUCA, I found that we also have an established process of giving gifts to our RE volunteers each spring. It's hard to have a big enough garden in Metro Atlanta that we can grow thousands of plants each year the way that Bill and Rachel do. But in 2013, I had the privilege of sitting down with Michelle Bishop and Mr. Barb Grieve to decide what the gifts would be that we would give to our RE volunteers and how we would brand them with UUCA's Phoenix logo in purple, the color that we have adopted for branding our religious education program, our religious exploration program. Over the course of several years, the presents we came up with were a water bottle, a tote bag, a drink cozy, a bottle opener, and a blanket, and a mug. We had a great time imagining folks using those all together to have a family picnic. Those RE volunteer gifts were designed, ordered, and delivered with great love and with appreciation for the gratitude they represented. By the way, if you're teaching religious exploration this year, you get to pick any of those gifts. Just see Michelle or Nanda or myself after the service. We'll hook you up. These gifts represented both our gratitude as a staff who had privilege for taking responsibility for the gifts and the gratitude of the whole congregation who pitched in to make the gifts possible. They represented the weaving of a multi-generational, multicultural web and community that changes lives. It is a web that you all have helped to weave as parents, facilitators, mentors, chaperones, musicians, editors, donors, supporters, encouragers, guides, comprehensive sexuality educators, role models, listeners, and in so many ways, too numerous to list, but too important not to hold in our hearts. The web of UU lifespan religious exploration has shaped everyone in this room and our families. And it has nurtured literally hundreds of thousands of young adults and adults in our wider world who may or may not be active pledging members of a UU congregation, but who are some of the most moral people I know, some of the people that the world needs most right now. Gift giving is a sacred ritual, and by giving presents to our RE volunteers, we express our holy gratitude for their contributions to the work of religious exploration. Although RE gifts make up only a small part of the life of our congregation, they are important aspects of how we make meaning and demonstrate the importance of religious exploration in our congregation and in our world. Just as many Buddhists practice almsgiving because monasticism is crucial to their faith communities, we practice RE volunteer recognition and recognition of all sorts of volunteers, and gift giving for RE and other sorts of volunteers because RE is crucial to our faith community. In the coming months, UUCA will once again be recruiting volunteers for many important roles in our RE program. This is not a recruiting pitch, but rather an expression of the deep and sincere gratitude that I and our staff and everyone in the congregation has for how you all have shaped that important part of our congregation and our movement. I hope that when we do a recruiting call, you will consider volunteering as you are able. Whether you are an almsgiver or a venerable monk or both, UUCA is grateful to you for the present and future and ways that you have and will contribute to religious exploration. I am grateful to you all for nurturing the present and future of a faith that I love. Thank you. I love you all very much. Peace, salam, shalom, and may it be so.